one of my haunted experiences at my childhood farm. I grew up on an old farm built in the late 40s. The farm wasn't extremely old since it got torn down and turned into a suburban neighborhood in 2015. However, my experiences there varied from getting chased by cows to being chased by Addie. There was a small, old abandoned homestead about 100 yards from my house, and that's where Addie lived. She died in that house before the farm was built, and there wasn't much known about her. A few times a week, my friends, who lived on a farm neighboring to mine, my brother, and I would go to Addie's house and explore. There was one particular experience that makes my bones shiver when I remember it. It was in the evening, and the sun was about to set while we were in Addie's house. There were birds and crickets chirping outside, and we could hear the creaks as the cold breeze brushed against the house. Suddenly, it went quiet. We couldn't hear the animals chirping anymore, and it was as if the wind got louder and harder, so we decided to head back home. As we headed out the front door, we heard footsteps on the second floor. My smart friend decided to sprint towards our house, but the rest of us stayed put for a second in shock, and then like a shot, we heard those footsteps stomping swiftly down the stairs, and we booked it. We ran inside my house and locked the door behind us. The stairs inside that old abandoned house were open and had no back, so you could see people coming up and down the stairs from the front door. I never spoke about it because I didn't want to scare anyone, but as we heard those footsteps coming down the stairs, I could see the silhouette of bare feet and ankles running down through the cracks of the steps. What she found on her dad's USB. So a few months ago, my wife tells me this story of a girl she knows here in our neighborhood. She lives with her parents, or used to. The girl, that is, not my wife. Anyways, one day she needed a USB, and, remembering seeing one in her father's toolbox and thinking he must have gotten it free with some drill or something, she went and got it. She slips it into her computer, hoping it works, and is surprised to find files on it. She clicks into one, and what she sees next paralyzes her to the chair. It's her dad, and he's looking into a camera and fiddling with a button trying to get something right, and behind him is her mother, his wife, sleeping on the bed. Sitting on the chair, her hands beginning to shake, she intuitively understands something's not right about this, and when her dad goes over to the bed and starts taking the quilt off her mother and pulling down her panties, she puts her hand to her mouth. I'm not going to tell you what happened next. It's no secret or anything. Everyone in this neighborhood subsequently found out, what with it having been uploaded to some obscure porn site and then making its way to other more known ones. But let's just say it wasn't good. I mean, it wasn't anything that'd get it banned from the main ones, on the face of things, but the fact that it had all gone on without the woman's knowledge, not to mention her consent. Yes, you heard me. The woman, this girl's poor mother, hadn't known a thing. You see, this maniac had drugged her, and when she was comatose, he went about doing what he did. Now, remember, this is before the girl found out everything else, and so after she'd watched the video, she avoided her dad like the plague in the house and nearly told her mother what had happened on several occasions. She couldn't do it though, and so she eventually moves out and stays with a friend until she figures out what to do, her emotions all over the place. Well, she lasted about a week, I think it was, because she finally told her mother what she'd found and seen. I don't know how the mother reacted, but I guess it wasn't good, because they both took off to the cops and filed a complaint. Things moved fast afterwards. The cops went, searched the house, found the USB, along with a few others, arrested him, and kept him locked up for a while, asking him questions and whatnot. This gave the woman and her daughter enough time to pack some things and leave the house. They'd eventually move back into the house, but he came back first and, realizing his wife had gone, and the real reason why his daughter had left the week before, went into a mental rage, thrashing the house and breaking the windows and throwing everything out onto the street. They reckon he'd have burnt the place down if it hadn't been for a local lad here who won a few bodybuilding competitions subduing him. I mean, what a situation, the whole thing. A tragedy. A sick, twisted tragedy. We got lost in a forest, and it was one of the strangest experiences of my life. The following is a story that took place quite a few years ago, but it still baffles me completely. I'm a teenager, and I've been in scouting/Boy Scouts for nearly my entire life. I really enjoy exploring with my friends and being trusted more as I've grown older. A few years ago, 2 girls named Amy and Harriet asked me to head into the woods surrounding our campsite to find a long, straight stick suitable for carving into a point. Bear in mind that I was a lot younger back then. Harriet was older, and Amy was only 1 year older than myself. We had been walking deliberately in the same direction to avoid getting lost and memorizing the surroundings as we went, intending to find our way back easily. About 15 minutes in, we couldn't find anything suitable, so we turned around to return to the campsite. That's when the initial panic set in. The trees had almost unnaturally woven themselves together in such a way that it seemed our path had disappeared entirely, as if it had just vanished. We looked around 360 degrees, and suddenly, everything looked exactly the same. Trees that we could have sworn were different from one another appeared as if they were all copies of the same tree. We kept walking in what we thought was the correct direction, shouting for help as we went, and eventually came across a concrete path, almost like a road, but very narrow, splitting the forest into 2. We didn't follow the road as it went in the wrong direction for our campsite. On the other side of the path was more forest, and nearby was an abandoned shack, likely used for storage or something else. We had no idea anything like this was out here in these woods, so we just kept walking. Eventually, we reached a road we didn't recognize. A woman wearing a pink and purple regatta outdoors coat walked past, and we frantically asked her for directions to our campsite because, by now, according to our watches and Harriet's phone, we had been walking for an hour and a half. She said she had never seen us before, but mentioned another campsite in that direction. We followed her advice and eventually returned to our campsite. We apologized frantically for being away so long and explained that we couldn't find anything. The leader, Ian, could see that all 3 of us were shaken up. He stated, confused, that we had only been gone for 25 minutes and that our free time was still ongoing. To this day, this baffles all 3 of us because our free time was supposed to be 40 minutes long, and our watches and phones indicated that we had been gone for hours. The forest we were lost in felt crushing and claustrophobic, as if we had entered an area where the concept of time didn't apply. I believe in the paranormal, but this was unlike anything I've heard or experienced before. It felt as if we had been in a time vortex or something, where hours in the forest were only minutes in the rest of the world. The feeling was very strange, and it stayed with me for the rest of the camp. The house across the street. My wife and I embarked on a years-long quest to find our starter home, a challenging journey in itself. Our mission was compounded by a tight budget and our qualification for a loan strictly limited to rural housing. It felt as though an invisible line had been drawn around most of the communities on our map, declaring, "You can't buy there." Surprisingly, I was drawn to the quiet allure of country living. One place, in particular, piqued our interest, a quaint village named Wright, nestled amidst the orchard-draped countryside. Wright consisted of one aging church with a haunting cemetery, a rustic bar, and a scattering of weathered homes. It felt perfect. We set our sights on a home that seemed tailor-made for our needs. The only hiccup was that the property was occupied by 2 individuals who were technically squatting there. It's been a while, and the exact details have faded, but I vaguely recall they had rented from the homeowner but stopped making payments. In any case, the house would have to go through a short sale, and the current residents would need eviction before we could assume ownership. Despite being weary from our prolonged search and having ridden a roller coaster of emotions, we were captivated by the house's unique setting and decided to take the plunge. The current tenants appeared friendly, and we optimistically assumed they'd vacate peacefully without damaging the house. Luckily, we never reached that point. The listing agent, an eccentric character, rarely returned our calls through our agent. To cut a long story short, we spent 2 frustrating months attempting to make progress with the purchase. Our offer was accepted, but progress ground to a halt. Each time we reached out to our realtor, she'd inform us that she couldn't reach the elusive listing agent. Eventually, our patience wore thin, and we withdrew from the deal. At the time, we were disheartened by the missed opportunity. Fast forward approximately a month, and we were in our duplex watching television one evening when we witnessed the unimaginable. The old house directly across the street from the one we had tried to buy appeared on the screen, engulfed in flames. Shockingly, the 20-year-old residing there had brutally murdered 3 of his family members before setting fire to the house in a desperate attempt to erase the evidence. He fled the area, becoming a fugitive. We couldn't fathom it. Shivers coursed down our spines as we contemplated the mere 20-foot distance separating us from a gruesome multiple homicide. No, the violence didn't spill over to our house, but it was chillingly close. Even 13 years later, the memory still sends shivers down my spine. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you want 10 years of amazing luck.